Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're taking a closer look, a really critical look, at a major event in the Church, the canonization of Saint Carlo Acutis. That happened September 7th, 2025, alongside Blessed Pier Giorgio Frassati. And I want to start just by asking you, listening right now, when you first heard about Carlo Acutis, what jumped out? Was it, the computer stuff, his youth, the genes and trainers? Or did something deeper catch your attention? Because our mission today is really to cut through that surface-level noise. We want to offer a balanced perspective, drawing from the materials we've reviewed, and that means we need to tackle both how a modernist might frame him just by his youth, and how some ultra-traditionalists might be tempted to dismiss him because, well, he lived after Vatican II. The sources we're using today, they really offer that necessary balance. It's the kind of analysis you find when truth matters more than, winning ideological points. For the full context, you can always check out the source provider at www.epistles.online.
That framing is absolutely crucial, especially considering this canonization happened under Pope Leo XIV, who, as we know, really stresses unity. This event, it's much bigger than just celebrating a cool kid with a computer.
Mm-hmm.
What the Church is doing here formally is declaring Carlo lived a life of heroic virtue, that he reached this profound, deep union with Christ. So we have to look at the foundation of that holiness, not just the superficial bits.
Okay, let's unpack this then. When you look at the media buzz, the headlines, it's all patron saint of the internet, the influencer saint.
Okay.
What's the biggest misunderstanding there? What are people getting wrong?
The main misunderstanding, especially if people aren't maybe well catechized, is thinking Carlo's a saint because he was modern, because he used tech or dressed casually or knew his way around the internet. They're confusing the tools he used with the actual source of his holiness. And the sources we looked at are crystal clear on this. Sainthood isn't handed out for being trendy or, good with computers. It comes from heroic virtue. That's a tough daily grind of self-denial, constant prayer, sacrifice, and just total devotion to Jesus Christ. If the message gets watered down to just cool saint with a computer, then, well, it suggests holiness is just about being nice and maybe tech savvy. And that completely misses the real spiritual cost, the depth of true sanctity.
That's such a key distinction, the cause versus the consequence. Like
Yeah.
his famous website documenting Eucharistic miracles. That didn't make him a saint.
Exactly.
It was the result, the fruit of a holiness that was already there, growing. The root, as you said, was his incredible heroic love for Jesus in the Eucharist.
Precisely. His hobbies, his computer skills, those were just ways he expressed a love that was already driving him. His life shows that heroic virtue isn't stuck in one time period. It applies whether you're living in the 13th century or, like him, the 21st. It's the internal spiritual battle, that love for God you can't see, that fuels the outward actions, not the technology itself.
Okay, so speaking of that core love.
Yeah.
If the computer work was the fruit, let's dig into the root. And this is where it gets, really interesting, when we bump up against some of those modern church tensions. His specific devotion to the Eucharist.
Yes, this is absolutely central, but it's often glossed over or conveniently ignored. Carlo's whole spiritual life revolved around the Eucharist. He went to daily Mass. And critically, the sources really highlight this. He received Holy Communion reverently on the tongue.
Why does that specific detail, how he received communion, stir up so much debate and, frankly, conflict today?
Because it hits these entrenched ideological positions head on. You have modernists who often value, let's say, approachability and simplicity. They tend to avoid mentioning receiving on the tongue because they see it as, rigid or maybe an unnecessary throwback. It doesn't quite fit the narrative they want to build around Carlo as this relatable modern figure. Then, on the flip side, you might have some ultra-traditionalists who look at him post-Vatican II context casual clothes and just dismiss him. They might assume, wrongly, that he couldn't have had proper reverence. They get stuck on the externals, too.
So it sounds like both sides can get caught up in the surface details. The modernists focusing on the casual style, their traditionalists maybe on perceived lack of formality, and they both risk missing the actual substance.
That's exactly it. The truth, based on the evidence of his life, is that Carlo had this incredibly deep love for our Lord, and how he received communion was a direct, visible sign of that internal adoration. It wasn't casual, even if his clothes were. That specific practice is pointed to as one of the clearest signs of his profound faith, connecting him to that long, timeless tradition of Eucharistic reverence.
Right. So moving from tradition to current processes, let's talk about the canonization itself. We've seen some faster canonizations recently. Does a quicker process, even under a pope like Leo XIV who wants unity, maybe send a signal that holiness is now more about public profile than, say, decades of quiet hidden struggle?
That's a fair question, and it's true. The Vatican has streamlined some of the bureaucracy around canonization lately, but simplifying paperwork isn't the same as lowering the bar for holiness.
Okay.
The actual standard for sanctity, that hasn't changed. You still need proven heroic virtue. The person must have lived and died in God's grace. Think about Saint Teresa of Calcutta or Saint John Paul II.
Yeah, relatively fast, too.
Right, their processes were quick, but nobody seriously doubted their heroic virtue. It was plain to see. So maybe the speed reflects better organization, or perhaps the church sees an urgent need for modern examples of holiness. But genuine, deep sanctity is still the non-negotiable foundation.
So the process confirms it doesn't create the saint. Okay, let's clarify the theology then. What does the church actually declare when someone is canonized? What does it mean for us, the faithful?
It gives us what's called moral certainty. Now, the church never declares who's in hell, but with canonization, it declares with certainty that this person is in heaven enjoying the beatific vision.
Wow, certainty.
Yes. And the Catechism touches on this paragraph. 828 talks about saints being models and intercessors. When Pope Leo IV canonizes someone like Carlo, he's confirming that person lived and died in God's grace, and he's officially holding them up as an example for the whole church to follow. It's like saying, here is a guaranteed role model.
Okay, guaranteed role model.
Mhm.
But inevitably, two criticisms pop up with big canonizations: money and miracles. Let's tackle the money first.
Yeah, the money question always comes up. And critics aren't wrong that funding is involved. These investigations, they cost a lot. You have documentation, experts reviewing things, medical panels, travel for witnesses, the big ceremonies in Rome. It all requires resources.
So it's not pay-to-play sainthood.
No, that's the cynical view. The reality, the real insight here is more practical. Often, the speed at which a cause moves forward can depend on the resources and organization behind it. Think of it as necessary logistical support. It helps promote the cause, get the word out globally. It's not buying the outcome.
No.
Having financial means just helps ensure that an inspiring life like Carlo's doesn't get stuck in some forgotten archive, but can actually reach and inspire the wider church sooner. That's the goal.
That makes sense.
Okay.
Okay, what about the miracles? We live in a pretty skeptical age. How thorough is that investigation? Is it just based on stories, or is there real scrutiny?
Oh, it's incredibly rigorous. Miracles are definitely not just accepted at face value. The process demands documentation that's often stricter than what you'd need in a court of law. An alleged healing, for instance, has to be immediate, complete, lasting, and have absolutely no possible natural explanation.
So doctors are involved.
Yeah, absolutely. First, independent medical experts review the case. Often these experts aren't even Catholic. They have to unanimously agree. We have no medical or scientific explanation for this recovery. They look at all the records, the diagnosis, the scans, follow-up tests. Only after the medical board says it's inexplicable does the case even go to the theologians. The Vatican only recognized Carlo's miracles after they cleared this very high bar.
That level of scrutiny definitely backs up the idea of moral certainty the church is aiming for.
It does, and those official verified miracles are like signposts. But I think the sources also point to something maybe even more profound, the unofficial miracles.
What do you mean?
Just Carlo's own joy, his personal witness, that deep Eucharistic devotion. Even when he was just a teenager, it apparently inspired loads of conversions, people coming back to the faith, spiritual healings. That ongoing invisible fruit lives turned towards Christ because of him. That might actually be the greatest, most lasting miracle connected to his life.
That's powerful.
And ultimately, I think that's the real takeaway from Carlo Acutis. True modernity isn't about embracing the latest tech trend or fashion. It's about living the timeless truth. The Eucharist is the source, the absolute center, the summit of Christian life. Sainthood isn't about being up to date. It's about loving Jesus Christ with everything you have and letting that love pour out, especially at the altar.
So wrapping this up, what does it all mean for you listening? I think the core message from Carlo Acutis' canonization is this powerful reminder. It's heroic, deep devotion, not just being nice or good with gadgets, that the church holds up. That's what matters, no matter how fast the process goes or what tech you use. And maybe here's a final thought to chew on today. Given that how we approach the Eucharist, like Carlo receiving on the tongue, is often seen as an outward sign of inner faith, what practices in your spiritual life right now are the truest external signs of what you most deeply believe? Something to think about.
And for Catholics who are looking for that genuinely balanced perspective, we've been talking about one that avoids both the modernist watering down and the ultra-traditionalist reaction. The source material we use today, which you can find on Epistles, is really a valuable resource. He takes these challenges to the faith head on. His mission is very clear. He's openly fighting against clericalism, liberalism, modernism, really all the things that weaken faith and contribute to the crisis in the church today.
So we really want to warmly invite you to support his apostolate any way you can. Helps praying for the mission, sharing his posts with others who might need that perspective, subscribing to stay updated. It all helps keep this work going and freely available. And of course, if you're in a position to help financially, that support is crucial for keeping this perspective alive and active. You can do that by going to paypal.me/epistles. Thank you for joining us for the deep dive. We'll see you next time.